Attracting the poorhouse. As long as you hold the poorhouse thought, you are heading toward the poorhouse. A pinched, stingy thought means a pinched, stingy reply. No matter how hard one may work, if he constantly holds the poverty ideal, the poorhouse thought in his mind, he is driving away the very thing he is pursuing. The man who sows failure thoughts, poverty thoughts, can no more reap success, prosperity harvests, than a farmer can get a wheat crop from sowing thistles. Poverty is a mental disease. Someone has said that no one ever went to the poorhouse who did not attract the poorhouse by his poorhouse mental attitude. Observation and long study of the question have convinced me that, as a rule, people who make miserable failures of their lives expected to do so. They had such a horror of the poorhouse, they lived in such terror of coming to want, that they shut off the very source of their supply. They had so warped their minds that they could see nothing but poverty ahead. They wasted the precious energy which might have been utilized in happiness and prosperity building, in expecting, dreading, and preparing for the dire things that might come upon them, and, according to the law, they got what they dreaded and feared. Thinking war, talking war, anticipating it, getting ready for it. In other words, preparedness for war. The perpetual war suggestion was largely responsible for the outbreak of the greatest war in history. If all the nations involved had talked peace, thought peace, expected it, prepared for it, there would have been peace, not war. So long as people talk poverty, think poverty, expect it, get ready for it, they will have poverty. Preparedness for poverty, expecting it, attracts it, confirms poverty conditions. We are constantly drawing to ourselves that which we expect. If you are sending out a perpetual poverty thought current, a doubt current, a discouragement current, no matter how hard you may be working in the opposite direction, you will never get away from the current you set in motion. The sort of thought current you generate will flow back to you. Everywhere we see people trying hard to get on, struggling early and late to better their condition, and yet never expecting or even hoping to be prosperous. They do not believe they are going to get what they are working for, and they do not. A typical example of those who keep themselves in the poverty current is a woman I know who is constantly affirming her inability to better her condition. She answers her better-off friends who tell her that she ought to have this and that by saying, "Oh, it is all very well for you rich folks to talk this way, but these things are not for me. We have always been poor, and I suppose we always shall be. We can only have the bare necessities of life, and are fortunate if we get these. Of course, I might indulge in a little treat for myself and the children now and then, but that would be extravagant, and I must save for a rainy day." Now, I have no quarrel with people who save for a rainy day. It is the part of prudence to be prepared for all emergencies. It is a splendid thing to save for spending, for enjoyment in our later years. But people who begin early to provide for the rainy day, and who deny themselves every little pleasure and enjoyment for the sake of adding to this provision, fall into the habit of pinching themselves, and usually continue to do so through life. This woman limits her supply by her conviction that every cent she can spare must go to the rainy day fund, because she is always going to be poor. She assures herself and others that she is never going to have the things she would like to have because of her poverty, and so she starves the lives of herself and her boy and girl in anticipation of a day of possible want. She is a type of a multitude of men and women who settle down to their poverty, become half reconciled to its limitations, and do not make a strenuous effort to get away from it. That is, they never dream of exercising their creative positive thought, but continue to live and to realize in their conditions the negative, destructive poverty thought. These are the people who are always saying they cannot afford things. They cannot afford to send the boy or girl to school or college this year. They cannot afford the necessary clothes or the needed vacation because of the rainy day, which, like a specter, rises at every feast. on every occasion when they try to get some enjoyment or satisfaction out of the present. They are always postponing things until next year, but this next year never comes, and the children never go to the academy or college, and they themselves never take the needed vacation, the travel in one's own country or the long-promised trip abroad. They keep forever postponing the enjoyment of the good things of life until they can afford it. And that time never comes for people of this apprehensive habit of mind, because they always want to lay up a little more for the future. I know a number of people well along in years who are still pinching themselves not only on the comforts but even on the necessities of life in anticipation of the possible rainy day, for which they are always planning. They make life one long continuous rainy day, and little realize that they often tend to create the need for which they are perpetually saving. We sometimes read in newspapers striking illustrations of the results of this starved, rainy day habit of mind. A New York daily recently reported a typical instance, that of an aged woman who had died alone in the slums of the metropolis. She had been dead several days when her body was found, and so wretched were her surroundings, it was first supposed that she was penniless. On investigation, however, it was found that the woman had in ready cash and in bank deposits almost $10,000. Pauperized by her diseased mind, this wretched creature, like so many other poverty-stricken souls, died of starvation in the midst of plenty. Her mind was so obsessed with the poverty thought that she even denied herself the necessities of life. For years she had shut herself away from the great stream of life flowing all around her, so that she might hoard and hoard and hoard. She would allow no one to enter her rooms, and died alone and uncared for, leaving behind her the money which would have made her comfortable, happy, useful, and would have prolonged her life. She was as truly a victim of the poverty disease as though she didn't have a cent. These are the questions multitudes of people all over the world are asking themselves. They express the acuteness of the suffering from the poverty disease, so apparent in every civilized country. But where is our supply coming from? How are we going to pay the rent, the mortgage off the home, the farm? Where is the money coming from? What will happen to us if we cannot get it? Where are the children's clothes coming from? How are we going to get the necessaries of life? Where is our supply coming from? Why can't I get a job that will enable us to really live? Nothing else gives human beings so much anxiety. Nothing else is such a perpetual irritant as this fear of what is coming in the future, this dread of poverty, of not being able to provide for the necessities and the comforts of those dear to us. The fear of not being able to maintain ourselves and rear our children in comfort and respectability. It demagnetizes us, drives away the things we want, and draws to us those we dread. Job said, "The thing I greatly feared has come upon me. That which I was afraid has come to me." People who have an abnormal fear of poverty attract the very condition they dread and are trying to get away from, because the mind relates with whatever it dwells on. Our doubts and hatreds and fears, the things we relate with, we attract. Whatever you allow your mind to dwell on, you are unconsciously creating. If you think continually of misfortunes, of poverty, if you fear you are going to fail in your work, that you may come to want, if you are always thinking about the possibility of your business declining, if you fear that you are losing your grip on your trade or profession, you are aggravating your trouble and making it worse and worse. There are multitudes of people who never expect even to be comfortable, to say nothing of having luxuries. They expect poverty, hard times, and do not understand that this very expectancy increases their magnetic power to attract what they do not want. Not long ago, a young man who was greatly depressed because he could not get on in the world asked me what I thought the trouble was. He said he had always worked hard, but did not seem to make any headway. About all he could do was to earn a bare living. Everything appeared to go against him. Fate, he complained, seemed determined to keep him down, no matter how hard he might struggle against it, and he was doomed to be poor, to be a nobody. He believed that hard luck, poverty, and failure were family traits, for his father and grandfather, he said, were hard workers too, but they could never get on, never get away from poverty, and he didn't expect he ever would either. Another, an older man, who sought my advice in a similar difficulty, lamented the fearful inequality of human conditions, and rallied against his luck and the injustice of fate. "I work early and late, Sundays and holidays," he said, "and I haven't taken a vacation for years. I have been struggling and striving and pushing to make my way in the world since I was a boy, and here I am, past 50, and never succeeded in anything yet. Now there is something wrong somewhere in society when such persistence and such constant efforts do not enable one to get anywhere or to rise to any position worth while." These two types of people are constantly heading toward poverty and failure in their minds, and then complaining when they have got what they invited. By the law of mental attraction, they could not get anything but poverty and failure. Each had desired success and prosperity, but had always expected the opposite. He had slaved and toiled in an aimless sort of way, belittling himself and his talents, with the inner belief that it was all he was good for anyway, and that if success by any chance ever came his way, it would be a stroke of luck, and not because it was his due by inherent right. No man can become prosperous as long as he holds in his mind the picture of limitation, of lack and want. We do not get things in this world which we do not believe we can get. We do not accomplish what we doubt we can do, even though we have the ability to do it. In every community, in every occupation and profession, there are able, conscientious men and women who try very hard, so far as their actual labor is concerned, to get on in the world, but who don't expect to get on. It is pitiful to see them toiling day after day, but always facing in the wrong direction. They are working for success in their vocations, working for a competence for themselves and their families, but all the time expecting failure, anticipating poverty, living in an atmosphere of mental penury. There is no law of philosophy by which you can possibly produce just the opposite of what you are holding in your mind, what you are concentrating on. If you are thinking down, if you are afraid or worried, if you have fears and doubts, if you keep visualizing, thinking, talking hard times, panics and financial crisis, your business will shrink and shrivel accordingly. If, on the other hand, you have confidence, expectation of better things, if you are convinced that conditions are going to improve, you set in motion a thought current that will back your efforts with an irresistible force.